Amazing. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Born Social's third digital event. I am Abby. I'm Client Services Director at Born Social, and I'm here to kick us off and talk through just a few little housekeeping bits. So we've got 45 minutes of awesome content to come first, and then we've got 15 minutes at the end to answer some of your questions. So at the bottom of your screens you should see a little box that says Q&A. Please submit your questions in there throughout the session. I'll be going through them and putting them back to our speakers and panelists at the end. If you've got any other questions that aren't about TikTok or that you would rather email us to directly, you can email us at shout@bornsocial.co.uk. We're also recording the session and we will send you the slides afterwards so you can pass on as you wish. So this morning, hopefully you're all in the right webinar and you're all here to listen to us talk about TikTok. So I guess over the last 18 months, but specifically the last three, that curiosity around TikTok has intensified. We continue to get questions from brands and other marketers about, when is it right to use TikTok? How do we do it? And almost what does good look like? So we thought this morning was a great opportunity to try and answer some of those questions for you. So to do that, we've got three speakers this morning. We've got Essi, who's our senior strategist at Born Social, and she's going to talk you through history of the platform, stats, and pretty much everything in between. We've then got Shari, who is our senior creative at Born Social, and she's going to talk you through what does good content look like. She's got some great brand examples in there as well to get the inspiration going. And then we're going to move on to a panel. And excitingly, on our panel alongside Essi and Shari, we have our guest speaker, Lucia, otherwise known as Chi with a C. So Lucia is a TikTok creator with around 400,000 followers and some pretty awesome brand partnerships under her belt. So we're excited to have her on board to answer some of those questions for you, not just from a brand and agency perspective, but from a creator themselves. So I'm gonna let Essi kick off. Remember, you've got that Q&A button at the bottom, so please submit those questions and I'll gather them throughout. So Essi, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Abby. So as Abby mentioned, I'm senior strategist at Born Social. So I will kick us off by looking at why should brands care about TikTok. So kind of going to look at what the current picture looks like for the platform, what it might look like in a year or two. Just a word of warning, there are a couple of charts and diagrams here. So I hope you have a cup of coffee in your hand. But I think it's important to kind of show the scale of the platform and where it's going. But I'm going to kick us off. So why do we care? Seemingly because it seems to be everywhere at the moment. So people proposing to their significant others somewhere in Devon, to the viral TikTok songs being turned into a Spotify playlist, to Matt Hancock being on the platform. It does seem like TikTok has been everywhere over the last couple of months. And I don't know if you guys have seen, but they've also released their first ever UK TV ad just this week. So if everybody hasn't been talking about it previously, they certainly will be after that. And I think throughout the COVID-19 crisis, it's been one of the platforms that seems to have gone from strength to strength, really. And I wanted to start off by taking a look at some of the figures behind the success. So first, looking at the global view. So if we look at kind of where TikTok ranks amongst the other social platforms, so looking at the graph here on the left-hand side, we're looking at around 800 million users worldwide compared to, say, Instagram's billion users, for example. So kind of gives you a better understanding of where TikTok ranks globally, which is essentially right behind Instagram. And it has far surpassed Twitter and Snapchat in terms of user figures. But what is important to note that in Douyin, that is the TikTok in China, and especially countries like India, they still very much drive those global figures as well. However, it has already become a platform to take very seriously outside of China as well. Now, in terms of what the view looks like at this stage, so 2020 is very much predicted to be the big growth year for TikTok. So it will be the year when we start seeing the adoption from the core kind of young audience group expand to much wider age demographics. And if you look at the graph here on the top right, which shows you the global downloads by month, we can see that we are already kind of on that road. And to top it off, now that people have got more time on their hands, and they are spending it on TikTok. So the whole COVID-19 situation has resulted in an uptick of downloads and time spent on the platform as well. And then if you look at the graph here on the bottom right, which shows the global downloads by quarter, in Q1 this year, TikTok actually generated the most download for any app ever in a quarter. We only accumulated more than 315 million installs across the App Store and Google Play as well. So huge user growth over the last couple of months or so. Now, when looking at the UK, so the user base has doubled in 2019. So we're looking at nearly 5 million users now, and comparatively, when thinking about the wider social ecosystem and the other platforms, there are 24 million Instagram users, around 13 million Twitter users, and 14 million Snapchat users at the moment. So that is kind of how it compares to the big, more established platforms. So it's still got a while to go in the UK to reach those numbers, but as we've already seen, it's definitely on the way there. In terms of penetration, so the graph here from eMarketer from February this year, looking at the penetration by social media platform. So this year, 20% of UK social network users, so about 1 in 5, will use TikTok at least once a month, which I think again shows that we're moving away from that core user group of those, I guess, Gen Z representatives, and really starting to spread out to a much wider demographic as well. What I thought was really interesting is that when we consider the situation with the coronavirus, for the week of 23rd of March, which was the week that lockdown was enforced, UK installations surged by 34%. So it's very clear that when people can't spend their time in pubs and parks with their mates, they spend it on TikTok. Which is just quite telling of what has been happening over the last couple of months. Now, in terms of what the future looks like in regards to growth, so TikTok is forecast to surpass 10 million UK users in 2021. And that is really, again, a sign that the platform is kind of broadening its popularity beyond teens. And from 2022, as you can see here in the graph, the growth is expected to slow down as the app becomes kind of highly saturated amongst its core young users. And also, I think over the next couple of years, what we can expect is to see more competition from those more established platforms. Facebook have already launched the kind of video sharing app Lasso, which looks very, very similar to TikTok. And there are loads of kind of younger newcomers on the scene as well, like Byte, again, kind of this similar video feature platforms. And equally, I think to kind of follow this growth trajectory, TikTok will have to ensure that it avoids any of those bigger scandals. So addressing safety concerns will definitely be hugely important as they grow. Now, then just wanted to look at what we do know about TikTok users. Stuff that's what more do we know about them except the fact that they are Gen Z. There was a global web index did a study last year ranking TikTok users' most distinctive attitudes. There was some quite interesting stuff there. In terms of the users, they are much more likely to be categorized as status seekers. And they're very much brand conscious, and they are actually very conscious of status as well. So they are 1.5 times more likely than your average user to promote a brand online if it enhances their status online. So I think what this tells us is just that this audience will be precious about any brand partnerships and what the brand promotes as well. So it needs to be the right fit when considering whether your brand should jump on the platform. What else is that when we look at the behaviors of TikTok engagers, so those that do use the platform actively, we can see that yes, majority of the time goes towards watching someone else's video. That is kind of what the whole platform is catered towards. But 55% of them uploaded a video in the past month, which is, I think, when you think of the rate of creation for social media platforms these days, it's incredibly high. So if you think of, for example, compared to Instagram, where people are so used to kind of having this much more of a passive outlook and passive consumption style, I think 55% of a creation rate is really, really high. Also, what I thought was really interesting is that 50% people share someone else's video on other social network, which is huge. And I think all of us have seen, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on Instagram, people sharing those TikTok videos, which I guess all of them just act as ads for TikTok and kind of gather more people to the platform. Also, we know that people spend large amount of time on the platform. So the average user spends 52 minutes per day on the app, and that probably has risen over the last couple of months as well. And then what about the future? So I think it's interesting to look at what's happening on Douyin, so the Chinese TikTok, and almost how could that influence what might happen here. So a bit of, I guess, predictions or speculations, what the future might look like here. So in terms of the evolution of the age of Douyin users, you can actually see that the kind of the less than 24 demographic used to be very prominent on the platform. But as kind of time moves on, the slightly older demographic start gaining more ground as well. And outside of China, 43% of TikTok users are aged 16 to 24. So that's slightly younger age demographic. Whereas in China now, over 60% are 25 to 44. So it's really, again, that we've seen that kind of expansion of the age demographic in China on Douyin already. Also, when you think of sort of content that's produced on the Chinese TikTok now, it contains stuff like microblogs, lifestyle content, business advice. People can upload videos up to 5 minutes long, and there's these like fictional mini dramas that have started to appear as well. So I think it's really interesting to look at where the kind of content formats could go on TikTok here in the UK over the next couple of years as well. And when looking at the sort of top content publishers on Douyin, it's really interesting to see that brands only actually represent a small portion of content producers. And yes, that can be due to regulations in China. But I think it just goes to show how important, celebrities, creators, influencers are in the content creation and content publishing as well. So I think that's definitely something that we'll continue to see here in the UK as well. Now, that was a bit of a kind of whistle-stop tour of looking at the most recent stats and then what's happening with the platform from growth perspective. So now I wanted to move on to look at 5, factors to consider if you want to get on TikTok, now wondering what's the best way to do it. So number 1 is that one size doesn't fit all. I think it's important to know that TikTok as a platform really is quite unique, and we can't just dive in and use it as a bit of an extension platform for existing executions or existing campaign content. It really does need its own kind of content. And I think it's interesting to look at the type of content that does well on the platform. And I think younger generations in particular are tired of this, what I call performative authenticity that's so common, especially on Instagram, kind of showcasing those perfect lives, and everything is hugely curated and considered. Whereas on TikTok, it's much more raw. So people kind of demand this, you know, genuine talent and people with opinions or funny personalities. And that's why also it really needs proper listening and proper thinking. It essentially needs a specific strategy. So you can't just jump on there using some Instagram story content that you might have leveraged on Facebook or Twitter previously. So that's number one. Factor number two is that sound really leads content on the platform. It really is unique in the way that music is used on the platform. It's so different to any other social media platforms in that way. And music really is the kind of virality driver on the platform. And a lot of the humor, it's not just, you know, the dance challenges that rely on music, but it's also a lot of the humor relies on kind of the unexpected combinations of different sounds or songs and videos. So it's really not just background music that it is. And videos are typically built around a song or music as well. So which makes it great in a sense that all the content is quite global, because the language doesn't really tend to pose a significant barrier. I think a great example of, I guess, the impact or the power of music on the platform was the Old Town Road, which I'm sure we've all heard way too many times by now. But it was really the first clear example of TikTok, I guess, turning a song into a meme and then into a smash hit that you unfortunately heard everywhere for a couple of months. Equally, there are a couple of, like, I think, great brand examples of how brands have understood the importance of music. So last year, I believe, it was when Elf Cosmetics became the first brand to compose an original song for TikTok. So they composed a Ice Lips Face song that they used in a challenge of the same name. And I think it's collectively been viewed over like 1.2 billion times by now. So it became massively popular. And the campaign performed so well that they actually extended that Ice Lips Face into a full-length song and made it available on Spotify as well. So it just goes to show that, I guess, the power of music on the platform and how it's used. Factor number three is what I call remix culture. So 99% of the stuff that you see on TikTok is based on a trend. It's all based on these repeatable formats that people use and kind of mix and remix as they wish. And what I think is so interesting about the platform is that element of remixing. And I do really think that is almost the future of creation on social media. Because really all the content is on TikTok is memes in video form, where users kind of co-opt these different sounds and remix different videos with special effects, which makes the content so much more accessible to more people. And, you know, while original kind of social content can be hugely powerful, I think remixing gives, you know, really ordinary people all around the country the power to kind of layer their context and self-expression and kind of share within existing meme culture. And that I kind of argue is more powerful than creating a kind of a polished brand video, a polished piece of content these days. Second to last, so looking at number 4, which is silence brand. TikTok is, you kind of have to be ready to give up control to an extent. You can't necessarily produce this content in a studio the same way you would shoot a very slick TVC. You know, it has to be raw, it has to be authentic, you have to be open to mistakes as a brand. And that's why it's so important to, you know, listen before you act as well. It's really just not another platform to put vertical video on. And it definitely does require an appetite for risk, as well as a bit of a willingness to, I think, self-deprecate as well. I think an example where it didn't necessarily go as well as it could have is a Just Eat, Just Emoji hashtag challenge, as it was called, which was based on this popular trend of miming different emojis, as you can see here on the right hand side. So what they did is they collaborated with a couple of different creators and then released this hashtag challenge. But why I didn't think it worked necessarily as well as it could have is that they didn't back it up with any organic content. The profile was otherwise empty, and as the format was based on an existing challenge, but it didn't really add that much new value. Like, why would anyone want to participate in a kind of a branded version of an emoji challenge that people would be doing kind of taking part in otherwise as well. So that kind of resulted in a silence brand treatment from some of the users as well. So again, kind of taking risks and being bold with the content on the platform is really key for success. And last one, and possibly most importantly, number 5 is creators as a way in. So creators really are the lifeblood of the platform. And I would argue that almost every single piece of successful content on TikTok centers on talent in one way or another. So it's all about thinking, how can you make that work for a brand? And I guess the reason for why creators are so important on this platform in particular is the fact that if you're not on the For You page, which is the kind of main discover feed when you first click onto TikTok, it can be quite difficult to be found because the algorithm just favors the most viewed content. And the best way to get viewed is to partner with creators. And large majority of successful kind of TikTok content relies on talent of different kinds. So there's a massive pool of really talented people out there. So, you know, it could be your Instagram famous who've now migrated over to TikTok, or it could be YouTubers who have been previously producing content on that platform, like Chi, for example, who's with us today. Or it could be people who have just kind of identified a niche on TikTok. As I mentioned, there's such a massive variety of content out there, and so many different types of creators. You know, it's not just those dance challenges that everybody's doing, but everything from kind of comedy to kind of animation and different types of content. So really creators are the ones to keep an eye on as well. So those were my kind of 5 factors to consider if you're thinking about TikTok. So I'm going to hand it over to Shari, and we're going to look at what good looks like on the platform.
Thanks, Essi. I'm going to give you a bit of a break from talking now. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I'm Shari, Senior Creative here at Born. So now that we know all of the ins and outs of TikTok, we're going to have a look at what some good content looks like on there, particularly for brands. So we're going to look at this in 3 kind of areas. So first, there's kind of 3 avenues that a brand can take when it wants to delve into TikTok. That is through advertising, through organic content, and through working with creators. Sorry, my slides are a little bit slow. So we're going to kick off things with advertising. Just before we do, I think it's best to kind of note that, you know, advertising is our traditional kind of route that we know that brands can take on other platforms such as Instagram and Facebook. And it does work in a pretty similar way on TikTok. You know, you get your vertical video served within your feed. But one thing to note here is that good advertising on TikTok is actually quite difficult to find. You know, there are probably a couple of reasons for this, but we can kind of think of it in, you know, it's quite uncharted territory still, relatively still a new platform. And some brands do feel that it's still quite expensive to advertise on. And when we compare it to the content that's created organically and through creators, it just doesn't cut through as well. But we have found a couple of good examples to show you. So let's take a look at them. So the first one here is from a brand called Boomf. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a greetings card company where essentially, I think you open it, confetti comes out and all that jazz. And I think their selling point is in the fact that you always get a reaction from the recipient. And so this works really well for TikTok in the fact that it really does feel like user-generated content. It's quite rough and ready and it's pretty low budget. And this is, you know, it gives it that kind of raw authenticity feeling that Essi spoke about earlier. And it feels like content that any user could have uploaded and isn't too jarring on the feed. So it's a great example of being able to use low budget content for advertising on TikTok. Similarly, with the next one, this is from the dating app Happening. I actually got served this last night on my nightly TikTok scroll, and I actually just had to put this in because I thought it would be really good for you guys to see. You might think it's a little bit strange as a piece of ad content, but that's why this works so well, because it kind of disguises itself as a piece of organic content within your For You page. So it's, you know, it's your typical TikTok style. It uses kind of like native in-app text. It's very Gen Z in its humor, and you know, then at the end you realize it's an ad, and it's quite quick and snappy as well. And this is low budget, easy to put together, and you know, you just need that one hook, that one kind of clever line to draw people in. And I think if your audience is Gen Z, you know, this is the style of content that they consume. And so kind of mimicking that is really something that might get them to stop and watch your content. And finally, I've kind of mentioned a lot of the content that's quite rough and ready as good examples of content. And that isn't to say that there is no place for polished content on TikTok. You know, we mentioned that one size doesn't fit all. You know, you can't just take your content for Instagram stories and bring it across to TikTok. But I believe with a couple of tweaks, you can make this work. So I chose this one here from Estee Lauder because, again, this does look like something that was repurposed from Instagram stories. But just simply aligning the text of the ad to the left just takes into account the UI of the TikTok app, because, you know, there's pieces there that text could get lost behind, so the text won't get lost in the ad. So, you know, there are a couple of small tweaks that you can make to make your Instagram and Facebook content work for TikTok. Just bear in mind, you know, what you want to get across there. So Essi is now going to talk us through organic content.
Great, thanks. I think when it comes to organic content on TikTok, the kind of bar tends to be much higher than on other platforms, because it has to be entertaining. Otherwise, people are just not going to care. And again, it's when it comes to creating an organic presence on the platform, it's so important that the content is specifically created for the platform, not repurposing it from other channels. So just a couple of examples I thought were particularly good. First one, which is Chipotle, we all know them, and they kind of do organic content through 4 very kind of distinctive different pillars. So they have memes, which is kind of mimicking the sort of meme videos that you see going around TikTok all the time. Behind the scenes stuff, which is showing the product. So you can show the product, you can kind of show almost how it's made, but in a way that the users would as well. Then there's sort of more branded type of things, but still the kind of look and feel is super lo-fi. Again, looks like something a user could create. And number 4 is creators. So again, they use creators in a really smart way of, you know, bringing them in and allowing them to create the sort of content that basically fits both the creators feed, but then also the Chipotle feed as well. So why is it good? I think it's a really native way of approaching the channel. The product content in particular is quite, you know, raw. It's interesting. It mimics the sort of stuff that people are already posting on the platform, so it fits in really nicely. So I think overall they just show real understanding of the platform and of their audience on there as well. The second example, a little bit rogue, but this is called Gushers. They are a confectionery product or candy in the US. And why I thought they're very interesting is that they found a way to talk about the product that feels very well suited to the platform. So they talk about their product launches in a kind of meme format, but then they've also, for example, the video here in the middle is this girl basically pretending to be a YouTube beauty influencer, and is doing like a very classic YouTube beauty tutorial using the product as different kind of flavors, as if they were different flavors of lipstick. And it's kind of this, you know, it works because it's funny, it's genuinely funny, it's quite self-deprecating, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's not scared to make fun of the product or the brand. So also the hand product one here on the right, it just really shows, it's just very quite random and shows mimics the sort of content that people on the platform do enjoy consuming. So just a couple of examples of the, I guess, organic side of things.
Great. So finally, we're going to have a look at how best to utilize creators on the platform to promote your brand. Again, as I mentioned, this isn't kind of groundbreakingly new. You know, we're used to seeing creators promoting brands on other platforms, but I think the thing to realize is that the content that creators produce on TikTok is quite different to that we usually see on the likes of Instagram. So to kick us off here, I've gone too far. Here we go. Kick us off, I wanted to mention this brand, What Do You Mean? They're essentially like a company that make cardboard games. They're quite funny. I would recommend. And so I've seen these on TikTok using creators to simply show themselves playing their games. And it might seem quite simple, But it really does give us kind of these real life reactions, quite unfiltered content. And basically it does exactly what you want to portray, to show how that game is played. And their latest game release, Incoherent, has not only gotten tons of traction on TikTok, but it also, you might have seen it doing the rounds on Instagram and Facebook. They made an AR filter, and that essentially is a similar way of playing the game. And I don't know if this was intentional, but this in the AR filter in itself turned into content that people could post on their TikTok. You know, so people posting their reactions to using the filter, putting it on TikTok. And so overall, it was quite a nice kind of cross-platform strategy to get people talking about their product, and it really, really worked well. And back to Essi for another one.
So the next one is Gymshark. So they have built their entire presence in social on brand ambassadors, essentially. And I think they use TikTok very, very cleverly. So they basically produce this, you know, short form content from their brand ambassadors that's easy to imitate, and we kind of challenge other people to do these same, I guess, fitness exercises as their brand ambassadors do. I mean, who doesn't want to watch fit people exercising? But it's a really simple strategy, but it works because the content, again, it's so easy to imitate, it's so easy to remix. And what I think is great, that when you compare it to their Instagram channel, their Instagram is much more branded, much more post, and again, their TikTok is much more, you know, it's full of this brand ambassador content that's kind of super authentic to the platform. So again, shows that their channel strategies are on point as well.
Great. And finally, on the creator front, we have got this campaign from EA. And this was part of a larger campaign that they had called #PlayWithLife. And so this was a really clever campaign that they brought into TikTok in a really clever way, I think. So the piece on the left was actually an ad campaign that ran on TikTok, which kind of fit in nicely with their hashtag challenge that they gave to creators, which they kind of nicely mimicked the larger ad piece. So creators used the hashtag, did the classic little TikTok twirl, changed the outfit, and it really took off, and other people also adapted the challenge. And I also think that this was just the perfect platform choice for EA to work on here, because creators are already on TikTok creating sim style content. And so, you know, to promote the sim game, it was a no-brainer, because Sims is already such a large subgenre on there. So I really think that if you're a brand and you're quite unsure if TikTok is right for you, I think it's just a good idea to scope out the platform. You know, is there already a conversation going on there? And if there is, then that's definitely something that you can leverage for your brand.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shari and Essi. That was great. We're now going to move into the panel and Q&A part of this morning. I guess before we do, I would like to do a better introduction to Chi. So at just 19 years of age, Chi has generated a following of over 400,000 people on TikTok, and also continues to post regularly on her YouTube channel, which I'm sure she'll give us a bit more insight into. If you haven't had the chance to follow her already, I massively recommend it. She produces some hilarious content and specializes in impressionist comedy. She's got some pretty famous fans in Lily Allen and James Corden. So thank you, Chi, so much for joining us. I guess one question to all three of you to kick off, which is something that we've had come through this morning, is, despite all those facts and figures and what the graphs are saying, you know, is TikTok a phase, or is it here to stay? Essi, would love you to kick us off with that.
I mean, Snapchat was meant to be a phase, wasn't it? And it's very much stayed. So I believe, yes, it is here to stay.
Awesome. And Chi, welcome. What are your thoughts?
Hello. I think that it's just as much good and not a phase as all the other platforms. And I think people might think it's a phase because of it resonates with younger people, but I think it's, you know, a new world for like creators and content to be associated with.
Love that. And then I guess one of the things that we've been asked on here is, how does the amount of time, you know, you as a creator or your followers spending on TikTok, how has that impacted the amount of time that you've spent on other social media platforms? We heard that you still have a YouTube channel. Is that something that you're still keeping up?
Yeah, I think it's just I always have like a different outlook on every platform. I just kind of make a different, you know, way of posting. So it's like I make my content cater to all the different platforms and still post on everything else I do. And I think it's not really changed the amount of time we spend on the other platforms. We just, like, you know, people are resharing things from TikTok on like Twitter and Instagram. And yeah.
Yeah, I think there was an interesting question from someone this morning about, you know, how do we use TikTok when lots of people are sharing that content from TikTok to WhatsApp to YouTube? How do you feel about sharing that content across to other platforms?
I think it just makes people want to check out TikTok more. I think people are just like loving it on Twitter and stuff, and it's easy for people that don't have TikTok to see it, but then it's making people think, oh, I want to go, you know, see that person on the app or like what else they've done. So just share, it helps. And also it's good because like their username's in it and that, so it's easy to find people.
So luring people in cross platform.
It is.
I guess the other thing that's interesting is, like, in those stats, Essi, we've seen, I guess, such a big shift, particularly throughout COVID. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Why have we seen that change in behaviour over the last 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, it has been super interesting to see. I don't think I was expecting the growth to be quite as quick as it has been. And I mean, people are bored at home. I think TikTok provides exactly the sort of light relief that everybody's looking for in these uncertain times, if you may. And it also means, you know, people are spending time at home with their families. And there's so many family kind of challenges, and people are pulling in their mums and dads, and it's just kind of provided the perfect platform to almost, you know, do a bit of an activity together as well. So I think it's just the combination of those that's really seen it skyrocket over the last few months.
True, I've managed to keep my parents away from TikTok up until this point, so let that continue. Shari, I thought interesting question coming on whether what are the particular trends that you've seen during lockdown that you think have been particularly interesting or particularly effective on TikTok?
It's interesting to kind of look back to the beginning of lockdown, because I feel like a lot of the trends that came up then have, you know, they grew so quickly and they also die out as quick as they appear. And that's how quickly things turn on TikTok. You know, at the very beginning we had like the Dalgona like frothy coffee and the blinding lights challenge. But now the ones I particularly like now are the people making tiny pancakes into cereal. I've seen everyone doing that recently. And just touching on the family element, I've really enjoyed seeing people turning their homes into like quarantine nightclubs, and it's essentially getting all the family involved. I don't know if anyone knows the TikTok creator Tyg Fleming. He's like an Irish creator. His entire family has like just become famous off the back of TikTok now. They appeared on like an Irish talk show recently. It's just crazy. But yeah, there's too many trends. I love them all.
And I guess trends is an interesting one. I guess people's understanding of those trends on TikTok is that you almost start with that copycat style, but you, I guess, personally have all of your content feels like original. What's the thought process there? How do you feel about copycat versus original content as a creator?
Well, I personally, like you said, I like doing my own thing and like making my own thing. There's no reason why like making your own thing can't then become a trend, kind of view it like that. But I think also like trends, they're not terrible. Like I still enjoy like doing them, but I try and do it but change it to make it kind of still stand out a bit. So I like original content and I prefer to do things like that, but I think that also you can use trends and benefit them your own way like that. So yeah,
you're starting the trends, that's what we understand. I guess there's lots of questions coming in here around how you know, whether it's right for brands, like what should a brand's approach to that be? Essi, what are your thoughts on whether a brand should kind of see a challenge and take it on and make it their own versus that original content piece that we've seen this morning?
Yeah, I think kind of just going to mirror what G said here as well. Like, I think it's absolutely fine to jump on challenges, and especially if you're looking to kind of start creating your organic content, it might be a good way to get started and kind of try and test what's happening on the platform and what the reception is, as long as you add that little bit of, you know, personality to whatever challenge that you're taking part in as well, so it doesn't come across as like, you know, classic brand just jumping on things again. But again, like, I think there's massive value in creating your own original content as well, potentially, you know, partnering with someone like G or another creator who understands the ins and outs of the platform, to get a bit of guidance, and I guess to alleviate a bit of those fears of, you know, what happens if I, like, what sort of content should I create for the platform, and what if it doesn't feel right, etc. But I think, you know, it could be either of those things. I guess again, it's just important to make sure that you're adding some sort of value to the audience as well.
And I guess, would you say there's some nice questions around how do you know if your brand is right? You know, we've got some questions in here about whether you can be a luxury brand and be on it, and also almost a service-based business. Are there brands and industries that are better suited to TikTok than others?
I think as we've already seen, there's a massive variety of content on the platform already, and I think that will just continue to grow as the platform grows, really. So yes, there are obviously, you know, categories and I think brands that are better suited or like are easier to create content for on the platform. If you think of your standard, you know, entertainment brands, for example, like Netflix doing a great job on the platform, obviously they should be, but I don't think, you know, there are also loads of FMCG brands that have seen success on the platform. I think from kind of personal and hygiene brands like Dettol, they started a kind of hand washing challenge in India, which was absolutely massive. So I think it's just, again, like finding your angle, and what you're going to go for is really, really important. One of my favorites brands on TikTok is this US based rug cleaning brand. It's absolutely ridiculous, but they produce this kind of very like ASMR type content of just rugs being cleaned, and that is all of their TikTok organic content that they produce. So like, who's to say that your B2B business can't be on TikTok?
She's not joking. She shares content of rugs being cleaned around the office. So I guess that's a good point. Almost there is an opportunity there. Shari, what is the point? Like, when should a brand get on it, and how? We've been asked a lot of questions about advice on like how to launch into TikTok. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think brands don't necessarily always have to have that presence on TikTok. I think it's just always good to be aware of what's happening on there. You know, I think it's the hub of trends and memes at the moment, and that often feeds into other platforms. So it's just, you know, if you're not ready for it yet, just like keep an eye on it and take that into account for other platform usage. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, you know, if you feel that there's conversation already happening on there, if you see other people mentioning your brand and turning that into content, then there's definitely scope for you to join. And like Essi mentioned, you know, it doesn't have to always be funny. I feel like people are always a little bit nervous because they're like, TikTok has to be funny or TikTok has to be dance challenges. It's such a vast area at the moment. You know, ASMR is huge on there as well, and that would work for loads of different brands. Yeah.
That makes sense. There's a question far earlier on from someone about how to plan as a brand. Almost this assumption that and understanding that TikTok is incredibly spontaneous. But I think there's absolutely scope, and we would absolutely advise you to plan your almost launch onto TikTok in the same way you would any other platform, which I guess goes for how brands would work with someone like Chi. You know, those agreements are made and content is produced with planning in mind. Chi, I guess, how do you decide on the brand partnerships that you work on, and if you've got any kind of, I guess, favorite or exciting examples that you can share with us?
I've worked with a range of like different types of brands, but I feel like the most important thing is just like working with brands who get me as like a creator and the things I do. It always helps if they know like the type of content you create themselves, and like but I enjoy working with brands that don't necessarily fit like or align specifically with like content, with my content, but I can see like coming up with a fun brief and things that I know that would challenge me. And I just know that, so it's just basically if we can, I just know if we can work together, and if they come up with an idea, or if I have an idea, just things like that really.
And is the expectation that that creative process should be quite collaborative with a content creator? Like, is it should the brand be coming to you with an idea, or is that kind of your responsibility, or a bit of both?
I think it depends on like what the brand is, probably firstly, but if like they have an idea, or even if they just come up with you with saying they want to work with you and you have an idea, I feel like it could work either way really, depending on the brand.
So I guess almost communication with content creators in the same way that we would across any other influencer campaign, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to go into some of the questions that we've got through. Lots of questions around metrics. So what metrics should either brands or creators be using? Essi, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, if you're, for the first time, if you're setting up your, first TikTok campaign, any benchmarks or KPIs can be very, very difficult to draft, because, I think even in the UK, when it comes to branded content and branded campaigns, there's only been a relatively small amount of that. So in terms of benchmarking, yes, you have your views of the content, so you can see kind of the level of engagement that you're trying to hit. But then also, I think it's super important to, as we saw for the Just Eat campaign example that I showed, yes, it might have had 190 million views, but then when you're drilling a little bit deeper of what those views were, and how much original content was produced off the back of that, and in particular what was the kind of reception in the comment section as well. So looking at your, more standard social media metrics like sentiment is, what has the reception been like? What are people actually saying? Are they creating their, user content off the back of the whatever challenge it is that you're making? I think those are some of the more important metrics to look at.
Nice, thanks. And question for you, Shari, I guess from Michelle is, do you think the content has changed now that the millennials are joining the platform? So I put myself in that category, millennials and all others. What are your thoughts, Shari?
Also same. I think it's a really interesting question, and I think it goes. I saw another one about how are older people perceived on the platform. I think that TikTok's actually a really beautiful like community, and whenever I see kind of like older people posting content and I see it going viral, the engagement in the comment section is just really kind. I think people are really, really encouraging of millennials and even older people joining the platform. I don't think the content necessarily has changed. You still have like your subgenre of very Gen Z humor, which sometimes I even struggle to grasp, but I think I'm getting there. But I think we can all bring our own little flair to it. So no matter what age you are, I think it's really, really opening up for all generations.
That's very comforting news for me. Chi, we've got a couple of questions around where you get your inspiration from for your content. Have you got any thoughts on how do you come up with these hilarious skits?
Well, a lot of the time it's like TV shows and stuff that I do like sketches on, so I could just be watching something on TV and I'm like, I must be in that program, I'm going to pretend I am in that program. So a lot of the time it's just watching things and living. So yeah,
almost the more time you spend on the platform consuming it, the more inspiration there is.
Yeah, you just see something and you're like, I must do that myself.
I think that's an important point for brands as well, is almost trying to come up with ideas and concepts is really difficult unless you're immersed in the platform yourself. So if you're trying to figure out like, what is the next step from this morning? I think it sounds quite interesting. Go and get the app and spend some time on it is the best way to try and start figuring out like, how do we get involved here? So there's some questions around, Essi, you mentioned it really briefly at the beginning, but almost concerns around safety or protecting your brand from the concerns that they've shared. Do we know what TikTok are doing to address that, and if not, how should a brand view those concerns? Essi?
Yeah, I mean, they've been working on it a lot over the last couple of months. In particular, there are loads of kind of parental controls that they've started setting up to make sure that the very kind of youngest of the users on the platform are safe and you know, are only able to view the sort of content that they should be able to view. But equally, I think if you're a brand that is particularly I guess risky when it comes to younger people seeing your content. I'm just thinking alcohol brands, for example, where you need to be sure that anyone who sees your content is over 18 or 21. I think it's, you know, really important, as if you would for Snapchat or any other platform. Just consider, obviously, is TikTok the right fit for you at the very moment? You know, it doesn't have an age gate in place yet. So I guess consider whether it is the right platform for you. But then also just, you know, ensure that the content you put on there is responsible and, you know, portrays the sort of image that you want to be portrayed of your brand as well on any platform, really. So I think, yes, they are taking steps to make it, I guess, a safer platform for everyone, but I think it will be a while until we see a proper kind of age gating system on there.
Interesting, thanks. And then one for you, Sherry, I guess the question around how TikTok now sits across other platforms, and how we think those platforms will almost, I guess, retaliate to that rise of TikTok. Have you got any thoughts on what you think Instagram, Facebook, or even there are some new platforms being talked about here, the like Byte, you know, how do we think those guys are going to react to what TikTok have seen during COVID?
I'm not sure, because I think I remember back when Snapchat launched, when Instagram stories launched, I was like, no, I'm staying on Snapchat, love Snapchat. And now I'm an avid Instagram story user. So there is the possibility of Instagram or Facebook or one of those platforms kind of, you know, launching a competitor app that does overtake it. However, I saw a couple of people mention about Byte and Lasso as well. I was a massive fan of Vine, and I was very sad when it died. But I do think that Byte is a little bit too similar to Vine. I think people actually now do prefer that longer form content. It's weird that shift from the 6-second content to up to a minute has actually happened, and people are actually into that now. I will never say that, you know, there's never going to be something that will overtake it, but I do really think that TikTok has grown at such an exponential rate and has really, it has the user in mind and has the creator in mind, which some other apps don't actually do. So I think it's fine for now.
Thank you. And then question for Chi, any tips on approaching creators for partnerships, and how do you talk about fees on that? Any thoughts or tips from you, Chi, on that?
I think this ties in with what I was saying the other day about in terms of TikTok, brands need to take it kind of more seriously, I think, because I think people think of TikTok as I don't think people really get the engagement compared to Instagram, and it shows with like fees being offered. Like, for example, like my engagement on Instagram is much lower than it is on TikTok, but like the fee that you always offered, and I find this with like a lot of my friends as well, it always offered more on Instagram regardless of but I think it's because people think that because of like the stereotype of it being younger people, it's not got the engagement, when actually it's actually got like a much better engagement than most of the other little platforms at the minute. So I think just like the understanding like everyone's engagement and researching the creator, really.
Yeah, nice. So almost have a think about, you know, if it's engagement that you're after, potentially TikTok could be a more cost-effective option for a brand at the moment than something like Instagram if the time was right.
Exactly.
Amazing. And then I had one final question around any insight on what we think the key considerations for launching over the next couple of months, and more specifically, I guess, the ratio of what we would advise for organic versus paid versus creator content. Shari, have you got any thoughts on that for everyone?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think organic is really important. I think obviously, as we said, there is room for advertising, but it is still something that's a little bit wishy-washy at the moment. We're not sure what works pretty well on there. I think creators is a really good way to go, but just to make sure that you have that organic content built up as well. One thing I'd say on organic content is, as I mentioned earlier, trends come and go so quickly on TikTok. So I'd say don't hesitate too much when you see a trend come in. If you think it will apply to your brand and it will sit well on your profile, then go for it. Just do it. It's, as we mentioned, rough and ready, and don't overthink it too much.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll wrap it there. Thank you so much for all of your questions. There are some brilliant ones. We'll share the slides and have a look through them all. But obviously, if we didn't get around to addressing yours, please do email us, shout@bornsocial.co.uk. The team are delivering some interesting TikTok strategy and partnerships with creators at the moment. So the team are there ready to answer those questions. Thank you so much for Chi for joining us. It's been lovely to have you on board, and I guess check out our own social channels to find out when our next event is, as we will continue to host them. Speak to you soon, everyone.